Once it reaches the brain, it's processed. The brain converts that to a picture. It then uses the storage function and the analytical function to call up memories of things you saw that were similar or may have seen before that were the same object. The analytical function compares the new picture to the memories and identifies it. At that point, the processor decides what to do about it. And it will probably send a new message to a completely unrelated group of muscles to initiate an action. And all of that takes place very quickly. Generally, it's so fast you don't even think about it. It just happens. Nerve transmissions move at a max of about 100 meters a second. Let me double check that. That doesn't sound right. Yep, that's right. So the speed of thought isn't infinite, but it is pretty quick. So basically, a thought or an impulse has three components: input, processing, and output. Input, processing, and output. Input relies on your senses. Most people would probably say that vision is our most important sense. Vision allows us to detect electromagnetic radiation. We call it light. Now keep in mind, the entire electromagnetic spectrum is composed of radiation that is both longer and shorter in wavelength than what we see. Wavelength is just the distance between the peaks of two waves. Longer wavelengths carry less energy. examples would be radio waves. Then you get into what we call the infrared portion of the spectrum. In between those, you've got microwaves. So radio waves, microwaves, infrared. Those are all longer wavelength, lower frequency, and lower energy. Microwaves, contrary to popular belief, do not penetrate tissue. What they do is they cause water molecules to vibrate. Those vibrations cause friction, which in turn causes heat. And if you've ever put anything into a microwave, I'm sure you know how it can get very hot. But I want you to understand, they're not penetrating your skin into bone like x-rays and so forth, okay? The infrared is perceived by humans primarily as heat. If you ever see anybody wearing night vision goggles, sometimes they are using infrared sensors. It's not visible to the human eye. You can't see it. Then you get into the visible portion of the spectrum. And this consists of colors. Red, then orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And those are from the longest to the shortest wavelengths that humans can see. Any color that is not on there is either going to be because of a combination of colors or a total lack of color. For example, white reflects all visible light. It reflects everything. Does anybody want to take a guess what black does?
It's the combination of all of them.
It's a combination of all of them. It absorbs everything. Things like brown, gray, pink that aren't on there, they're just combinations. Everybody got that? And then you move into the ultraviolet portion of the spectrum, UV. Insects and things like that can actually see ultraviolet light. A lot of the times, some of the markings that we see on flowers that don't look all that interesting to us are quite colorful in ways we simply cannot perceive because bees can see them in ultraviolet. Ultraviolet radiation will damage DNA. If it were not for the ozone layer, we would not exist on this planet. There's probably no life at all on Mars, not because of the lack of water or oxygen, but simply because of the amount of ultraviolet radiation it gets. Its atmosphere is very thin. And Mars is about twice as far from the sun as we are, so that ought to illustrate to you how damaging it can be. You've already seen we've got several defense mechanisms for that, right? But it's dangerous. Next up, X-rays. X-rays are so energetic that for all intents and purposes, your tissue, by that I mean skin, muscle, organs, is essentially transparent to X-rays. It's just like a window. That's how much energy they pack. They punch right through you. Every single time you get an X-ray for any purpose, you are increasing your cancer risk. Did you realize that? Now, it's a minimal increase. We're exposed to X-rays all the time, cosmic rays, that sort of thing. But I want you to be aware of that. And then finally, you've got gamma rays. These things are so powerful, they punch through metal. I've told you about my experience with that, didn't I? I guess not. Since y'all aren't interested, we'll let it go. Gamma rays are the worst. You get them, you're dead. There is no way your eye can detect anything except the visible spectrum. And just to show you, this is the entire spectrum right here, the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Right there, dead center, about that wide, is the visible spectrum. See how small it is? It's not this wide, it's that little hair right there. It's just to show you that even though we use our visual organs as our primary mode of sensation, in all likelihood, we're not really detecting most of what's out there. Is everybody clear on that? What is our second sense? Does anybody want to think of it? Probably touch. Well, we'll come back to that one because I want to get a couple others first. Let's try hearing sound. Your ears are highly specialized sensory organs that allow you to detect sound. Does anybody know what sound is? Huh? Vibrations in the air, or waves. So like the electromagnetic frequency, it actually has wave-like patterns that vary in frequency and wavelength. The speed of sound is determined by the medium in which the sound passes through. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, is it a gas like air? Is it a liquid like water? You ever been underwater and had somebody drop something, you can hear it? It's fairly distinct, isn't it? What about solids? Can it transmit through solids? You're trying to sleep at 3 a.m. and then the guy that lives down the road drives by with his rap turned up and you hear that boom, 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 boom. And you feel it in your bones. And you decide you're going to send him some vibrations in the form of high explosives to make him stop. Probably a good thing I don't have access to stuff like that at 3 a.m. because I've been tempted. But you see where I'm going, right? You ever notice that it seems you can hear things further away in the winter? That's because the density of air varies according to temperature. So the density of the air itself affects the intensity and the speed of transmission. But literally, when I expend energy to make my vocal cord vibrate, I send out a pattern of vibrations through the air. When it reaches Layla's ear, it causes small bones in there to vibrate. And then that pattern is converted to sound. It's converted into energy that goes into your brain and gets processed just like anything else. Our third and fourth senses are actually the same thing. We differentiate them based on the medium in which they are presented. Does anybody want to take a guess at what I'm talking about? Of course not. I'm talking about our chemosensory organs. Chemosensory organs. These detect chemicals. The first of these we call scent or smell. What's the second one, Kylie? Taste.
Think about what the five senses were. That's why I was struggling.
Don't worry, we're not getting hung up on technical terms. I use the term chemosensory because I want you to realize that both scent and taste are actually detecting and identifying chemicals. Scent detects chemicals that are dispersed in the air. In other words, they're dispersed in gas. The advantage of scent, you can detect something further away. The disadvantage of scent, it's nowhere near as sensitive in humans as taste. Bless you. Scent in people is interesting because most people, frankly, don't have a good sense of smell. There are a few people that are super smellers that can detect individuals by scent. They can detect disease by scent in some cases. It's crazy. But by and large, humans just don't have a well-developed sense of smell. We don't really need one though, do we? The irony comes in because smell is the sense that can be used to generate the strongest memories. Did you realize that? If you want to remember something, associate it with a strong smell. If you can figure that one out, there's probably a Nobel Prize for you. The main advantage, as I said, is we can detect things at a distance. If you're out in the woods and you're coming across something that's rotting, you're generally going to smell it before anything else, aren't you? You think of all the unpleasant smells that we have in life, and it's generally a warning system, isn't it? You smell something bad, you turn around and walk away. You don't want to stay there. And generally, that's all you need from it. The other one is probably far more important to us, and that is taste. It is way, way more sensitive. Mainly because liquid is denser than gas. Liquids are denser than gas. So that means you're going to have a much greater concentration of whatever chemical it is you are detecting. And obviously, this is most useful for what we put in our mouths to eat. Emma, what's your favorite food?
Chicken and rice.
Huh?
Chicken and rice.
Chicken and rice. You like the taste of it, don't you? And when you ingest that, your body identifies it, and it actually sends a reward to you. It stimulates the pleasure center of the brain. That means you're going to eat more of it, isn't it? Anybody like chocolate? I see most of us. Our brains are hardwired to reward us for eating sweets. Has anybody in here ever accidentally bit down on a pill of medication that you were taking? What does it taste like? Awful. Bitter. As in so bitter it's still there 3 hours later, you can't get rid of it, right? I don't mean just, ugh. I mean, it's get this out of my mouth and wash my mouth out and wash it out continually. That is because most medications or drugs are actually toxins. It's basically dosage dependent. And while in a low dose and a controlled dose like a tablet, it may have some benefit to us, in a larger dose, it can be quite deleterious. So your taste has evolved as a way to recognize things that are not good for you. It can also work with smell. I remember the first time I got COVID about 3 years ago. It was just to me like a rather bad cold. Fortunately, I'd been vaccinated, so I was more or less immune to it. The only reason I knew it was COVID was because I completely lost my sense of smell and taste. Normally, if you get stuffy, you might lose your sense of smell, right? But you can still taste things. Well, I couldn't even taste anything. I could be eating steak or warm wet cardboard for all the difference it made to me. Went to the doc, got tested, sure enough, it was COVID. A couple days later, it passed, I'm fine. That's because your sense of smell very often works with your sense of taste. You smell what you eat, you enjoy it more. We've all come home from work or school and you walk in and mom's fixing something and it smells so good, right? Got your chemo sensors at work. That's why when you get sick and you've got a head cold, you don't enjoy your meals as much because you can't taste it as well because you can't smell it. Keep in mind, what you're doing is detecting the same thing. They are essentially the same sense. They just report it in different ways because they detect it in two different media. Smell detects it in gas, taste detects it in liquid. So any questions about that? And how many senses is that? 4 or 3? It's 4 that we've listed because we typically see humans have 5, right? But in reality, that's only 3 when you get down to it. Because smell and taste are essentially the same thing. I'm just pointing this out so you don't go around with this elementary school idea of what your senses are. Everybody clear on that? And our last one, what was it? Touch. Touch should be at least 3 different things besides just touch. What we define as touch, probably more accurate, would be called pressure. We sense pressure. I like caressing touch. A hard, forceful touch. It's just pressure, isn't it? When you trail your hand across something to get the texture of it, you're the one applying the pressure. See where I'm going with this? You may not think of it as an internal sense, but it is. Anybody ever been driving up in the mountains and you come down and you feel your ears got a pop?
Mm-hmm.
That's pressure. You're detecting a differential in pressure internally and externally. You ever got hungry better? Can you detect when your stomach is empty? Didn't realize that was pressure, did you? It's all your sense of touch. We've all had a full bladder and we've all had to go, haven't we? Sense of pressure. What I want you to get from this is to take home the idea and understanding that what we call touch is really just a pressure sensor. And it's not just present in the skin. That is the most obvious one. It's probably the most useful one from our perspective. It's certainly the most used one. But we do have internal pressure sensors. We do have ways of detecting pressure in places you might not think of. Related to that, this is one that most people would never consider as a sense. We are able to sense temperature. Thermosensors. I'd be willing to bet most of you probably found it to be a little too cold in this classroom at the moment, am I right? I personally find it quite comfortable, but I like things on the cool side. When I got out this morning to get into my car, even I realized it was on the cold side. You're able to detect hot things, aren't you? Not just because they're glowing red. You get near something, you can feel the heat radiating, pull your hand away. Can determine temperature internal. If anybody has ever eaten a mouthful of hot pepper, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because the capsaicin molecules in the pepper bind directly to the heat sensors in your mouth and esophagus. If you've ever swallowed a mouthful of hot liquid, you felt it going down, haven't you? I think I told y'all about injecting myself with antibiotics, cold. So even though you may not realize it, you have temperature sensors internally as well. All that we combine under the generic heading of touch. I highly recommend that you two increase your caffeine intake. Don't feel bad, I want to yawn too. I actually slept well last night for a change, so I'm jacked up on caffeine and good mood. I like talking about this. I know your enthusiasm does not match mine, and that's okay. What's the last type of touch sensor? Let's see if anybody can guess it. What can we detect? Should I start humming the Jeopardy theme? Damage.
Oh, pain sensor.
Huh?
Pain sensor.
Pain. We're bringing the pain.
I was gonna get that.
Pain is a damage sensor. Did you realize that? Any time your body feels pain, it is letting you know that there is damage somewhere. Unfortunately, pain can be very generalized in addition to being localized. It varies in type, it varies in intensity. But it is your body's natural sense letting you know there is something wrong. A lot of people ignore pain. There are quite a few people who are hypochondriacs and also think that every single little ding they get, they're dying of cancer. The key is knowing the difference. But I can assure you, if your body is hurting, there is a reason for it. If it is a continual, ongoing pain with no obvious cause, you may want to get it checked out. I'm hurting right now, my lower back. Do I have a reason why I'm hurting, Cheyenne? Because I have a damaged back. So I'm not going to go to the doctor with that pain. I got checked up over fall break, and what y'all may not know is I've had a recurring pain right here in the joint. I figured it was something muscular. Went in and talked to the doc, and he pressed right on the spot. I was just kind of doing this, and he went right exactly to it. And he said, "I bet that feels better." And I said, "It went away." And he pulled his pressure off, and it immediately started back. He said, "Tennis elbow." An inflammation of the tendon. It's just a form of tendonitis. Probably overuse. But you see where I'm going with this? I want you to make sure that you understand that pain is a sense. It serves a purpose. And that purpose is to let you know something isn't right. Everybody clear on that?
How do pain medications are able to find exactly where you're hurting at?
They don't.
Does it treat overall your whole body?
Yep.
Cause I didn't know, cause I keep seeing memes of where it's oh, the ibuprofen that goes in and just trying to find where it's your pain is.
What it does typically is it binds to receptors on the neurons in the central nervous system and blocks all pain sensation. Has anybody here ever had a really, really strong pain med? May I ask what you had?
Oxycodone.
Oxy, okay. You felt good, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
It literally just felt like you were floating on a cloud.
Mm-hmm.
You have Oxy too?
Yeah, and then hydrocodone, and I've had morphine when I've had my surgeries, and it's just afterwards when you come back, you're whoa.
A lot of people like that feeling because that's what being high is. I hated it because I just felt like my whole brain was in a fog. But when I first got out of the hospital and I was starting my physical therapy, they were giving me straight morphine. And there were a couple of times when I actually cut myself accidentally and didn't realize it until hours later, simply because I didn't feel it. Got to be very careful of that sort of thing. Good question though. Any other questions about pain and what it is? All right. So, let me get back to the chapter. Characteristics of the nervous system. Sensory input, which we talked about. Integration and processing, which we talked about. And motor output. So senses are the input. The output is the motor function. The main cells in the nervous system are called neurons. Neurons. You've already seen them when you've looked at the tissue slides. They're very obvious. They have a cell body, which is typically circular or somewhat star-shaped. They will typically have a cluster of short projections coming off that cell body called dendrites. Dendrites. The dendrites are the receptors, the antenna. You all aren't old enough to remember back when cell phones actually had an antenna that you had to extend. Cars used to have an antenna for the radio. Yeah, I know, you can laugh at me. I had to use antennas on my stuff. That's okay, I still know how to write in cursive. I know how to trap you all. I could put you into a trap room with a rotary phone, a VCR, and the ransom note written in cursive. Am I right?
No, I think I can get out of that one.
You think you can get out of that one? Tyler's like, no. And that's okay because I don't know how to churn butter or hitch up a plow either. There's no need to learn obsolete skills. So everybody understand though what I mean? The dendrites are the receivers. They actually receive the impulse or the sensory input. Extending away from this, you've got a very long shaft called the axon. The axon. That's the transmitter. And when I say long, I mean the axon can be several inches long. These things can be huge. And at the end of the axon, there is a gap called a synapse. A synapse. S-Y-N-A-P-S-E. The synapse, remember, is a physical gap. It is a literal space between the axon and the next cell. Now, the next cell can be another neuron. It can be a muscle. You get the idea. The things that bridge the gap are called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters. We've already talked about acetylcholine. As you're going to see, there are a lot of different ones. There are another type of cell called neuroglia or neuroglia. I've heard it pronounced both ways. Neuroglia. You might also hear me call them glial cells. That's an older term, that's how I learned it. But they prefer if you call them neuroglia because they want to emphasize the fact that they're part of the nervous system. These are cells that specifically provide nutrients, support, protection, some would even say insulation. The neuron's only function is to transmit what we call an impulse. And that can be going in or going out. Is everybody clear on that? Types of neurons, the number of neurons, the number of connections each neuron has, that is going to be highly, highly dependent on where you find it and what its function is. We're just talking in general here. So there are two divisions of the nervous system. The central nervous system, this is the brain and spinal cord. Then you've got the peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, is everything outside of the brain and the spinal cord. So all of the nerves in the arms, the legs, the face, the back, the torso, your fingers, your nose, your ears, you get an idea. Just because it's in the head doesn't mean it's part of the central. If I touch you right here in the nose, you feel it, don't it? That's actually considered your peripheral. Most of your sensory organs are located in your head, aren't they? Chemosensors here, visual sensors here, auditory sensors here. Well, again, it's part of the peripheral, not the central. Is everybody clear on that? We can also divide the PNS into two divisions. The first is the afferent division, the afferent, A-F-F-E-R-E-N-T. You might prefer to call it the sensory division.
Can you respell the?
A-F-F-E-R-E-N-T. And all those senses we just talked about are tied in to the afferent division. Now remember, the senses are not just the limited five, right? True or false, you have a built-in oxygen sensor.
True.
True. Lets you know to breathe. These convert sensory information into impulses, then move it to the CNS. CNS is where it gets processed, integrated, memorized, thought about. Then it transfers to the other division of the PNS, and that is called the efferent division. E-F-F-E-R-E-N-T. And this is also called the motor division. And it, in turn, sends impulses out from the CNS to effectors. The effectors are mostly going to be muscles. However, it will also include some glands. Make sure you get that down. Like the sweat glands if you get too hot. The adrenaline gland when the idiot driving the beat-up truck pulls out in front of you and you have to lay on the horn and swerve out into the other lane to safely pass him. Yes, speaking from experience, Riley. I can see him trying not to laugh. We've all had that happen, haven't we? I want you to understand though, those are effectors, aren't they? Everybody clear on that? The efferent or motor division can also be divided into two subdivisions. The first is the somatic nervous system. Somatic. Best way we would call this is the voluntary nervous system, voluntary movements. So obviously, this one goes to the skeletal muscles. The other division is the autonomous nervous system, the autonomous. The autonomous system is the automatic system. Controls the cardiac muscle, right? Controls a lot of smooth muscles like digestion. Controls a lot of glands. Everybody with me? All right, for the next one, I want you to take a look at figure 10.3. This is on page 131 electronically, page 370 or 371 if you are using the hard copy. Does everybody see this? I want you looking at that so you'll be able to make sure you know what parts to know. The dendrites, you definitely need to know them. The cell body. The axon. Now, if you notice, the axon is wrapped in layers of protein called myelin. Myelin, M-Y-E-L-I-N. That's called the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath. That myelin is laid down by something called a Schwann cell. A Schwann cell. The Schwann cells are living. They're the glial cells. They're a type of glial cell. And essentially, the myelin acts as an insulator. It acts as an insulator. Not all nerves have myelin. Make sure you get that. Those that do transmit much faster. They are about 10 times faster than an unmyelinated nerve. Everybody got that? So the cell body contains the nucleus, mitochondria, Golgi, and rough ER. It contains the main functioning part. The dendrites are usually going to be highly branched. You're going to have a lot of them. They're the input. Then you've got the axon. The axon is always going to be single and long. It will always be very, very long. You only have one. It may branch. Doesn't have to, but it can. If it's in the PNS, you'll have the Schwann cells laying down the myelin sheath. If it has a myelin sheath and it's found in the brain or the spinal cord, it will be called white matter. White matter. These are masses of myelinated axons. In the CNS, rather than Schwann cells, the myelin is produced by something called an oligodendrocyte. An oligodendrocyte. The spaces between the myelin bundles, where you have the naked axon exposed, those are called the nodes of Ranvier. The nodes of Ranvier. So everybody with me? Classification of neurons. Multipolar. Has a lot of dendrites. Most of the CNS neurons are multipolar. Second is a bipolar. One dendrite, one axon. Typically found in the sensory organs, eye, nose, ear. The third is called unipolar. And basically, these have a single process or extension that divides into two branches. The peripheral portion has dendrites, and it is located towards the outer part of the body. The central portion actually goes into the spinal cord or the brain. These will often be grouped together into bundles called ganglia. So those are the three types by structure, three types as classified by structure. Now we're going to classify them by function. First are sensory neurons or afferent neurons. And as you might guess, these are part of the PNS and carry information to it, to the CNS. These are your senses. Just like muscles had a threshold, sensory neurons also have a threshold. You can have a touch that is light enough that you don't feel. Most of these are unipolar. Next up, we've got interneurons, sometimes called internuncial neurons. These lie completely within the CNS. They are multipolar. You may get the cell bodies of specialized interneurons joining together in structures called nuclei. These are the neurons that are responsible for sensory integration, memory, conscious thought, learning. I hope you're getting all that down. Your personality, dreams, all of that. When you think of the number of interneurons in the brain and spinal cord, and you think of how many possible connections they can make and how many different combinations, you quickly begin to realize why brain mapping is so difficult. You're constantly forming new connections between these neurons as you grow, develop, learn. This brings us to a concept called neuroplasticity. And that is simply the brain's ability to reorganize itself. Neuroplasticity is what allows us to learn. It literally is rewiring the brain. So it also allows recovery from injury. It's one of the least understood aspects about human anatomy. There is some evidence that recovering from past trauma, things like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, you actually rewire your brain to think differently. Forming new habits, breaking old ones, learning a new language. I hope you're writing this down. Learning to play an instrument. All of this is caused by neuroplasticity. Y'all ever heard of Phineas Gage? Phineas Gage was a man who worked in railroad construction in the 1840s. Now back then, the only explosive they had was dynamite, right? So they would drill the hole into the rock, put the dynamite in, and then they took an iron rod to tamp all that down and pack it. In 1848, Phineas Gage was doing that, and the dynamite went off. The iron rod went up through his jaw, through his brain, and out the top of his skull. He's toast, right? Think he's dead? He lived after that. Not only did he live, he functioned. There's him actually holding the rod that got driven through his brain. It changed his personality quite a bit, but he was able to live and function for another 12 years with mid-1800s medicine after his injury. Why? Because of neuroplasticity. The brain is a living, dynamic organ that is capable of changing itself. And I just want you all to make sure you remember that. Would any of y'all like to have extra lab time today? Then we'll knock off now and I'll see you in the lab at 5 till. Thank you.